Take it away, Dave.
Thank you, Kurt. Welcome, everybody. As an employee at your company, how would you approach your job differently if you found out that you were going to start getting equity in your business? If you're a business owner, and I know there's many business owners joining us here today, what do you think would change in your business if you shared equity in your company with your employees? It's my pleasure to join you today to discuss a gift that is near and dear to my heart. It's called employee ownership, and I'm in love with it. Employee ownership to me is a passion for making business a game. It's a love for working with a special team of people, dreaming together, setting goals together, and working together to serve your customers. Employee ownership is fresh leadership that empowers people to realize their full potential, both professionally and personally. And yes, employee ownership, when done right, can be a heck of a lot of fun. Preference is a case study of a local family business that has evolved into an employee-owned company with big aspirations. We've had many successes to celebrate the last few years and decisions that have turned out well. We also have learned from some adversity and from mistakes. Our team of employee owners is a testament to the potential that can be realized when everybody in your boat owns a paddle. So the value I offer you today is insight and some real examples on what employee ownership has done to our company. We're going to touch just briefly on the history of the ESOPs, and there's been a request to touch briefly on the politics of ESOPs in our current political environment. We'll share just a very high-level overview of the journey our company's been on since becoming employee-owned and the benefits to our company, our employee owners, and our customers. So, let's get started. Yes, everything will go smooth now that you know how to work this. So, employee ownership in the United States. You know, there's some misperceptions out there perhaps on what ESOPs really are and aren't. And I'm so delighted to have truly experts like Bob Hartman, Joe Skorczewski, and Jess Hulvik to discuss those things today. ESOPs were really pioneered and you could say invented by a really bold guy named Louis Kelso. And he was really bold. He was very active. He would fly around all over the United States, so I heard, throughout the 1970s in particular, advocating that, capitalism is good for America. But maybe what America is missing is that there aren't enough Americans that own some capital. And so he really challenged some people. He was an economist, political activist, and an attorney. And his message was, America could be stronger, have a stronger economy, and have a more stable society if more of us actually own capital, because we are a capitalistic country. And that was his message, and he was instrumental in helping found what we now call employee stock ownership plans. Yes, 2 for 2. So the politics of ESOPs, oh my gosh, lots of political things flying through the air, right? And the recent presidential election, and it seems to continue this year for various reasons. But we were asked to touch on this, and I'm happy to do so, and here's why. This is really refreshing because maybe ESOPs is one of the few things in our country right now that is truly bipartisan. It really is. There's a significant support, as you can see, from both the Republican and Democratic parties. And you know what? That's a good thing. The math on that works out to be about 60% of Republicans supported pro-ESOP legislation last year, and about 40% Democrat and Independent. So as we compare that to many other things going on in our country right now, that's pretty balanced, relatively. One thing I will mention, as I've learned about ESOPs the last 8 years about, To me, in my own take on it, is it's just a really good version of our free enterprise economy. And so far we've had one president in the White House that has gone above and beyond to support ESOPs. Does anyone know who that is?
Ronald Reagan.
Yes, good job. Ronald Reagan. Yep, he was outspoken about his support for employee ownership in our country and ESOPs. Okay, so we are Preference Personnel, founded by my parents, Larry and Candace Dietz. That was about 29 years ago. And just last fall, our name modified a bit to Preference Employment Solutions. You could, I'll touch on this a little bit more in the next slide, but long story short, I guess you could say I talked my parents into selling their company. Instead of me buying it, or my wife and I buying it, I asked them to do it. I asked them to sell it to an ESOP trust. 100% deal. We're currently 100% S Corporation ESOP. We'll talk about that a little bit more. As best we know, we are the first 100% ESOP company in our industry, in the recruiting and employment industry in the United States. As best we know, we have checked with the American Staffing Association. They're the largest trade association in our industry. The National Association of Personnel Services, the NCEO, National Center on Employee Ownership, and the ESOP Association. And as best we know, we are the first in the United States to do this. That's 100% ESOP. So I guess what that really means is we made a few mistakes in the beginning, I'll be honest. We just because we didn't know everything that we needed to know. Things are similar for ESOPs from one company to another, one industry to another. But at that time, we had no peers in our industry to help us out. And so that's part of our story. And that was part of the somewhat struggles that we had in the very beginning, couple of years of our ESOP. I had taken the wheel January 1st of 2013. That was when I became president and CEO, and that was about the time when my parents' retirement plan was, evolving, right? And though the interesting part of our story is our ESOP did not really take off until about the year 2014. And so, as mentioned in my opening, we've had a lot of successes with our ESOP. We made a few mistakes as well, and have learned a lot from them. Thankfully, it's all turned out really well, and I mean really well. For example, since 2014, which really was a pivotal year in our company when our ESOP really took foothold, so much has happened. It was just such a pivotal time, and I give a lot of that credit to the beauty of employee ownership. People were starting to get it. You share those stock statements with them every year. Thankfully, the numbers kept going up. That gets people's attention. But what I learned that I really needed, looking back now, is the right leaders. It takes the right leadership to lead an employee-owned business. In my opinion, level 5 leaders, Jim Collins, good to great kind of stuff. Leadership is really key in an employee-owned business, in my experience. In fact, with me today, I'd like to introduce to you some leaders at Preference Employment Solutions. With me here is our COO, Tanny Cook. Tanny, would you please stand? Tanny's been with us for just over 9 years and has tremendous growing responsibilities. Sitting next to her is Jill Benson, and Jill is our controller at Preference. Please help me welcome Jill. Also on our leadership team is Corey Holan. Corey, would you please stand? Corey leads Preference's professional division. And so these are 3 people back in around that 2014 timeframe that really got it, and they stepped to the plate to help support me in creating that employee ownership culture. And so many really good things have happened since. So my message to you is if you have an interest in exploring ESOPs for your business, do it right. Make sure you get the right leaders on board, because if you have the right leadership to roll it out, everything will go very, very well. Also with us today is my lovely wife, Misty. Misty, would you please stand? My wife of 17 years. I'm impressed I remember that.
Almost 17.
That's why you get married.
Better early than late. Let's see, flowers and dark chocolate. Flowers and dark chocolate. So Misty was very supportive of me when I helped transition our company from a family-owned business to an employee-owned business. Amazing amount of change that was happening during that transition and still is. And she was always there for me. Thank you. Love you. And also with us today are a couple of our employee owners. Todd Obing. Todd, would you please stand? Todd's been with us for nearly 18 years, and I remember him stopping my office, it was about a year ago or so, and he says, you know, David, this is a different company than it used to be. I remember that day so much, and I credit that to employee ownership. And also with us is Heather Ostrowski, our client relations manager. Please meet Heather. So to bring a company from some whatever ownership it had, whether it was family or otherwise, to employee owned, it takes having the right people to make that happen. And these are the people that help me. We have had many accomplishments that I give employee ownership credit to. The biggest one of all, and that's why I have it on the top of my list, is what we call self-responsibility. We're really big on being responsible for yourself. Not only your work performance, but your behavior at work. We're big on responsibility. Also, since becoming employee-owned, we've enjoyed our most profitable years. We've experienced 2 building remodels. We've placed a really big focus on capitalizing on people's strengths, and that's been a lot of fun. We've made great improvements to operational efficiencies. We've beefed up our safety program, which has resulted in less employee injuries. We formed a marketing team, an employment law team, and a legal contracts team. We've increased the level of communication and transparency on what's going on, throughout the company with all of our employee owners. Now there's only 16 of us, soon to be 17, so we're a small business. Though we definitely learned that when you're employee owned, you wanna, it's in your best interest to let people know what's going on. We have a heck of a fun committee, and I mean a really good fun committee. In fact, if any of you need to throw a party, a company party for your company, you give me a call, and I'll see if I can borrow you my fun committee, because they really know how to throw a really good party. And we like to have a good time at preference, so the offer is there. We've also identified and brought clarity to our purpose. After 28 years of business, we now have a purpose. And our purpose is to help people reach their full potential. And being in an employment company, we can do that, because we do that. And the type of people that are on our team, our employee owners, they're the kind of people that like to do that. So we love our purpose. We also know that if we live our purpose well, our client companies will benefit from that indirectly. And we even thank our community because of the uniqueness of our local workforce. We've greatly increased the level of trust in our organization. We've also learned a lot about how healthy teams function. Healthy, productive, and fun teams. Like how do you get that down well, the science of it? And these are all things I credit employee ownership to. We changed our new name, as you know. Our new brand will serve as an umbrella for future businesses that we plan to launch. We have it in writing, we're gonna do this. It's really an exciting time. Oh, and lastly, in the year 2014, we were named one of the best places to work for small businesses by Prairie Business Magazine, as well as 15 and 16. So why am I sharing these with you? It's because employee ownership made this happen. I kid you not. It's so fun when everyone is paddling with you. So why I did it? Let's see how we're doing on time. Why did this happen? So there's a couple of things here. So I'm 43 now, and when I was in my early to mid 30s, I knew that I want to keep doing this because it was a family business, and I really like it, and I want to keep working the family business. And so I had, some thoughts of buying out my family, my parents. They founded the business. They took a tremendous amount of risk to start it, and they worked very hard. They worked very hard to build up the business. And so I'm thinking, how can I buy this from them? And the one of the challenges I had is I didn't have the money. And so I checked with my wife, and she didn't have the money either. So she's really smart and has a big heart, but I guess neither of us had the money. So while that was happening, it was about a 2 or 3 year decision-making process, no kidding. It was a long decision-making process. And I was learning about this thing called employee ownership and ESOPs. And the more I read about it and whatever I could grasp to read up on it, just fell in love with it. I just thought, man, this is really cool stuff. And it did turn out to be really cool. So, and then to add to that, I just thought, if I'm going to be with this organization long term, we're in this for the long haul. I felt like this company could reach its most potential and have the most success if everyone that's working with me in the business had an ownership stake. And I still believe that today. So we'll just kind of take a high level through this, and for the sake of time, company benefits. There's many. These are some highlights. It's a lot of fun to come to work. Not that it wasn't before, it's more fun now. And why is that? When you come to the office and everyone on your left and your right owns part of the company with you, it's a neat feeling for me. And I wanted everyone to have those same feelings. When they drive into our office, it's 7, 8 o'clock, whatever, on a Monday morning, they pull into our parking lot. I want them to look at our front door and go, I own part of that. It's tangible, it's real. When you own stock in your own company, it can change the culture and change a lot of things for the positive. So some positive things. Our company is 29 years old currently, and for the first 25 years, we averaged about 30% employee turnover per year for 25 years. And the last few years, we've averaged 6% turnover. And so you can do so much with that. Suddenly you can accomplish a lot of business goals. You can get a lot of traction for increasing productivity in your business and setting your sights on some goals if you have the right people on the bus and can keep them with you. The skill level of our consultants is so increasing the last couple of years. And I credit that to employee ownership. And it's a good thing for the company. People in our organization, they really began embracing a couple of years ago that, okay, it's good to invest in the stock market and it's good to invest in maybe land or something, but your best investment is in yourself with your own professional development that can help you be a more valuable asset to your company and your customers. And that kind of caught fire in our organization a couple of years ago, and our company's benefiting from that. And innovation, I'll tell you, that's the one that really surprised me. When I wanted our company to go ESOP 8 years ago, I didn't expect that. That was a really neat surprise. We have so much creativity in our organization. It is so amazing that when you empower people, get their input on making decisions and allow them to participate at deeper levels in the company, wow, it's phenomenal. Quick example, we have in writing goals to start 5 new companies in the next 6 years. Now, the neat part about that is only one of them was my idea. This wouldn't have happened if it weren't for employee ownership. Tax savings. So, as mentioned, we're 100% S corporation ESOP. We pay no taxes. I'm smiling. We pay 0 taxes. So, kind of what, we're doing a few different things here with our ESOP, but, there's different ways to look at this. One of them is this. We're giving the money to our employees instead of the government. That's a lot of fun. Benefits to employee owners. Our employee owners receive a significant equity contribution each year. I remember 4 years ago, one of our employees, it was her first stock statement, and like every year when I handled stock statements, she broke down crying, a lot of tears, that day, and she just said, I had no idea, she goes, I've been here 1 year, and the money in my ESOP account is worth more than all the years I worked at my last employer's 401k. She was there 15 years. There's people in our organization that I know are considering retiring earlier. It's pretty cool. It makes me happy that we can provide a very significant benefit to our employees, and they recognize that this is a kind of a serious wealth building tool for their family to enjoy. But it's not just that. It's about being an employee owner, have that sense of responsibility. And a lot of what my job is today is to teach people how to think and act like an owner, and that's going well, mostly. We also have learned that instead of just training people on how to do a job, teach them your business more. Teach them like how the business really works and how we make a profit. So big difference, but that's another example of how employee ownership has evolved in our organization. And lastly, we're starting to see benefits for our customers. Part of it goes back to that wonderful talent that we have in our team and the great retention that we've had since becoming ESOP. Directly or indirectly, this is making a difference. It helps us understand our clients' businesses better. It helps us recruit and qualify employees with more skill in the respective niches that we work in. So lots of positive things with that. And Kurt, we have time?
You got all the time in the world.
Okay, well, so careful. So what I would suggest, we have some phenomenal people here in the room with us today that Kurt introduced earlier. Bob Hartman, Joe Skorcheski, Jess Halbeck. These people are so good at supporting our ESOP, and I know they have other clients in the Fargo-Moorhead area, some other ESOP companies. In all due respect, I would so love to give us all an opportunity to hear some things from them, because they truly are the experts at this. They support our ESOP so that we can focus on our customers. So let's do that, and then if there's time at the end, Kurt, I would love to come back to this slide on key lessons that I've learned in doing this, and we can just kind of Q&A.
Yep.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Any quick questions before we let Bob speak? Does anybody have anything for Dave right now? Or? So with that, Mr. Bob Hartman.
Thank you, David. It's great to hear stories of successful ESOPs, and there are a lot of them out there. I was trying to think of what I would like to share with you this afternoon, and first of all, it's nice to be here. I grew up in Detroit Lake, so moving down the road, I used to do it when I was a kid, so it's nice to be back. At the end of December, the beginning of January, I closed 9 ESOP transactions. 2 of them were sales of ESOP companies, and the other 7 were the establishment of new ESOPs. And I was trying to think, what did those companies have in common? What made them good candidates for ESOPs? So I'll talk about that. I'll talk about how to get a deal done, an ESOP transaction, and I'll discuss briefly what you need to be concerned about in operating an ESOP or doing an ESOP transaction. You're a 65-year-old business owner. You started the business 40 years ago. It's been successful. You owe a lot of your success to your employees who've worked hard to help you build your business. And you're thinking about what's the next stage. What am I going to do with my company? I don't have a son or I don't have a daughter who's going to be interested in running it. If I sell the company to a third party, I may get more money, but they may move the business out of town. My employees may lose their job, and that wouldn't sit well with me and my legacy as a founder of this business. That's a common thread that I see in almost all my ESOP transactions, and that was a thread in those 7 transactions at year end. Another thread was businesses that have been around a long time and have second, third, and fourth generation shareholders. The founders may be long gone, have passed their shares downstream to their children and grandchildren, and now they really don't have the connection to the business that their parents or grandparents had. Their interest is, as I discussed with Chuck Hoagie a bit ago, collecting the dividend, but the operation of the business isn't of great interest to them. And that's a scenario that I saw this last year. And so these business owners, and in that case, in two of those cases, the business was no longer operated by the founders. They had professional management in place, which was critical to their well-being, and they had some activity by the children and grandchildren about liquidating their holdings. How do I cash in? And again, the thought of engaging an investment banker and marketing the company was one of the topics that those companies considered. The drawback with that approach is one, it's uncertain whether you will be able to find a buyer of the company. Two, it takes time. It's a lengthy process to market your company. And three, once your company is on the block, your competitors know about it, and that has some adverse potential impact on the health of the business. When you do an ESOP transaction, on the other hand, you're pretty well assured of getting a transaction completed. There are some instances where you can't do it. But if you have motivated owners and you get the right parties involved, my experience is that you can get the transaction completed. So the companies that are good candidates are companies that have a good management team, that have good financial prospects, that their future is bright, and that they wish to keep the business locally owned for the benefit of their employees, to maintain the legacy of the founders. The companies can be in all different types of industries. Dave said he's the first personnel company in the country that created one. I know there's another one in North Carolina because you referred that company to me. You met them at a conference down in Dallas, and the woman who owned that business had been talking about an ESOP with an East Coast firm, and she was not happy with the advice she was getting, and she gave me a call out of the blue. She said, David Dietz said I should call you. And we did that transaction. They had a successful ESOP just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. So the company has to have good prospects. It has to have employees who are interested. They may not be interested initially, but in owning the company and performing for their benefit and the benefit of their co-workers. That's a critical element in how a successful ESOP operates. So the businesses can be, and we represent many companies in all different industries: personnel businesses, service businesses, manufacturers, distribution companies, professional service companies, architects, engineers, etc. So there isn't a type of a template that is specific to ESOP companies. Chuck was a board member of a manufacturing company here in Moorhead that had been a long time ESOP, and Chuck did great service as a board member for that company for many years, under trying circumstances, I might add. So thank you, Chuck, for your service to that company. The companies that can operate a business, an ESOP, are broad in their nature. And then the question is, how do you do an ESOP deal? If you conclude that you want to keep the company locally owned by your employees and you think it might fit for you, what's the next step? Well, what I advise clients when they come in to discuss that topic with me, first topic of consideration, once they made that decision, they've reached the stage where they think employee ownership makes sense, is to get a sense of value. What's the company worth? The owner may think his company's worth $20 million, and a financial advisor and appraiser like Joe might think it's worth $10 million. You don't want to go too far down the road on that path and find out you can't do it, it's not going to work because the owner's not going to get the price that he thinks it's worth, and so you've spent a lot of time and a lot of money for nothing. So to avoid that result, what I encourage my clients and prospects to do is first get a sense of value. Engage somebody like Joe or the company's accounting firm or somebody who's knowledgeable in business valuations to give you a preliminary valuation. So you have a realistic sense of what your company is worth. And that takes some time and some money, but it's time and money well spent, so you don't go down a rabbit hole that's not going to pay off. After you've done that, and if the appraiser says, I think your company is worth somewhere between $15 and $18 million, and you thought, well, you know, that kind of fits into the range. I think I want to move forward. The next step is to create the professionals who will assist you in completing that transaction. You as an owner, you need your advisor, your financial advisor, whether it be somebody like Joe or your CPA or somebody knowledgeable can assist you in valuing the company. You need an experienced attorney who's done ESOP transactions before to assist you. That's on the sell side of the transaction. On the buy side, you need first of all, you need to create an ESOP document, which is like a 401k plan. I did a short memo kind of giving you some of the nuts and bolts of how ESOPs are created and how they operate. Before you design the ESOP, what you're going to do is create your team, and on the ESOP side, you need a trustee. And back in the olden days, that trustee might be an employee of the company. We don't do that much anymore. If I own the company and I hire my CFO to be the trustee and I'm going to negotiate with Shane in buying my stock, him knowing that his job is kind of on the line, it might not exactly be an arm's length deal. So what we recommend in our transactions is that the company hire a corporate trustee who does this for a living. Jess at Bremer does that on behalf of Bremer. They act on behalf of the employees. They're independent, they're experienced, and this is what they do. The trustee would then hire his professional advisors. He'll hire a financial advisor like Joe from Chartwell to assist in valuing the company from the buyer's side. The owner's already used his CPA or his own financial advisor to get a sense of value. But the trustee is going to be buying the stock, and he's going to need experienced financial advice with respect to the fair market value of the shares that the ESOP will be purchasing. Under the law, the ESOP cannot pay more than fair market value. And in this transaction, the trustee will need an opinion from the financial advisor that one, the ESOP is not paying more than fair market value, and two, that the transaction as a whole is fair to the ESOP from a financial point of view. So that's the opinion that the trustee needs from his financial advisor. And the third party representing the trustee will be his own attorney. And that will be an attorney who's experienced, it should be somebody who's experienced in doing these transactions, who understands the fiduciary obligations that a trustee has in purchasing shares on behalf of a company's employees. And it's important that team, the trustee, his financial advisor, and attorney work in concert to achieve the appropriate result for the benefit of the employees. And once you have the teams in place, you create a bunch of documents, you negotiate the terms of the deal. It needs to be an arm's length negotiation between the parties. And there's substantial give and take. As you guys know, when you've done deals with me, there's a lot of give and take. And it's important that it be treated like any other business transaction between independent parties. But it's even at a higher standard because the trustee is not buying for his own account. It's not like a business owner is coming in to David and say, I want to buy your business, I'll pay you X. And he can pay whatever he wants because it's his own money and his own decision. When an ESOP trustee buys stock, he's acting in a fiduciary capacity on behalf of the employees, and that's the highest standard recognized at law. And so he's going to be subject to very, very careful scrutiny that he's done his job properly. And so after these negotiations go on, you create the documents, you enter into an agreement, and the transaction is completed. Oftentimes, the sellers will finance the transaction. They'll agree to take paper back from the company or from the ESOP to be paid over a period of years. Sometimes the owner wants to stay in the business for a period of time, easing out rather than getting out completely. And I know that when I'm representing trustees in this transaction, and we have competent management and a competent owner, we like that. There's continuity in the business owner sticking around and not only protecting his investment because he's owed money, but protecting the client contacts, the customer relations, his employees. And so we always view that as a positive, and we encourage owners to stick around. We enter into employment agreements with them, and we want to make sure that they're comfortable and that the trustee's comfortable in that ongoing relationship. And so that structurally is how a transaction is completed. What do you got to be concerned about? Again, these transactions are subject to careful scrutiny by the United States Department of Labor, which is charged with monitoring the fairness of transactions of this nature and making certain they comply with ERISA, which is the federal pension law. And right now we have a fairly aggressive Department of Labor looking at ESOP transactions. And inevitably the challenge that they make is that the ESOP paid too much for the stock of the company and did not do its due diligence properly. And that the net effect being that the employees overpaid for the stock. That I get advance sheets of ESOP cases filed once every couple of weeks where the Department of Labor has filed a suit challenging a transaction. And so it's critical when you do these transactions that care is undertaken by all the parties to make certain that it's a fair transaction to both sides, both the sellers and to the ESOP as the ultimate owner of the company. And if you have experienced people doing these transactions and having done them for a period of years, then you have I have a high level of confidence that they'll be done properly and that all the parties will be protected. So, those are my comments. We can answer questions, we can pass this on to Jill. Tell me your pleasure, Kurt.
My pleasure. We are short on time. Anybody have questions for Bob? Mike?
I have one. Do you have, as far as statistics on a percentage basis, how many fail versus succeed after a given length of time?
Yeah, I don't have those statistics. I've been doing this for about 40 years, and I've been involved in hundreds of ESOP transactions. I've had 2 fail. One was a bank ESOP in North Dakota during the difficult time period where rural banks had difficulty. That bank failed. It was taken over by the FDIC. And another company ran into very, very difficult economic times and had to close its doors.
So how long did that take, Bob? How long before they failed from when they went ESOP?
Oh, the time period? I inherited that one, Kurt. I didn't set that one.
Of course.
So I can't tell you when it started. I can tell you when it ended. And it wasn't fun. It wasn't a good result. You had employees who were relying on those funds for retirement purposes, and they weren't there. But I don't know specific data on failed companies. But my own experience in doing transactions, that's a very rare instance.
How long have you guys been, Mike? That's Mike Bannock, Western Bank, West Fargo.
Hey, Mike.
13, 15 years,
Yeah.
been very successful. We just happen to be a bank.
Well, Mike, you also happen to be my client. I deal with your northern office, western office, but you've been a good client of my firm for years. And you're a good bank, by the way.
Great
There you go. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Todd?
Just a quick question, so where does the money come from? Where's I mean,
Yep.
they take a cut of pay and then where does the cash come from?
Good question. The source of the cash for a transaction is the company will make an annual contribution to the ESOP, just like it does to the 401k plan now. And that money will be typically used to pay off debt. And then the shares that are in the ESOP get allocated to participants over a period of years. So, and the source of funds to the participants, and you continue that process for a period of years, and the employees who are there and who are active will get shares allocated to their ESOP account. They're not taxed until they leave the company. And at that time, their shares are purchased back from them by the company, and they're paid the fair market value of the shares. But it operates much like a profit sharing plan, like a 401k plan, but instead of cash, it's company stock that is principally the investment.
Bueller? Bueller.
With borrowing the money and getting all that debt on your balance sheet, so is that going to put pressure on the business to not be able to get capital? And then the second question is, do you see a lot of partial ESOPs where you can go 35, 40% and really disadvantages doing that instead of 100%?
Yeah, I'll do your second question first. We see partial ESOPs, and it's in part because of your first question. I'm pretty conservative with structuring these transactions. The last thing we want is a company that has to service debt well beyond its financial needs. And so that's the kind of analysis that you do, the trustee and the financial advisor and the attorney will be doing on the front end to make sure that this company can cash flow comfortably. And if we conclude that at 100% we're going to have a problem, then it will ratchet it down to 30% or some lower percent. We like 100% ESOP transactions for the reason David described. If you're a 100% ESOP company and other stars align, you can become an S corporation, which means you don't pay any taxes. And if you have debt on the books and you need to service it, the fact that you're not paying taxes gives you a 40% kicker in the ability to service your debt. So your two questions kind of go hand in glove. Careful front-end analysis as to the company's ability to cash flow is going to decide whether it's going to be 100% ESOP or something less.
So you can't be S Corp status if you're not 100%?
You can be, but you have some inefficiencies there. If you're a 30% S corporation ESOP, and I'm a 70% shareholder, that means, and we're successful, I have to take enough income to pay my taxes every year. And you have to do the same thing to the ESOP. And so you have a fair amount of financial slippage. You may be making greater contributions to the ESOP than a fair retirement benefit warrants. So we do it, we have it. It's not the most efficient technique, and I think we generally, if we can do it, we like to go 0 to 100 if it works. The transactions that I mentioned that I did at year end, were all, well, one was a second stage, it was an existing ESOP. And the other 6 went 0 to 100. Including one that was, I think they have an operation here in Fargo, Hebron Brick, is that right, Tom? They went ESOP at year end. Nice company, by the way. Anything else?
Brian?
Yeah.
Can you use an existing profit sharing or 401k plan to fund an ESOP transaction? Does that still happen or does it happen?
Yeah, it does happen. It's permissible. There's some wrinkles with doing that. And I've done that before. When you do that, what you need to do, in effect, is prepare a disclosure document for your employees and give them the decision whether they wish to transfer some or all of their 401k account into company stock. So it becomes a little more complicated, a little more expensive to do that. But I've done that on several occasions. We do some spade work on the front end before we do that, before we spend all the time and money. And we do informal surveys to the employees and say, here's what we're thinking about. If we were to do that, one, would you be interested? And two, if you were interested, at what level of your profit sharing account would you be interested? So we have a sense at the front end whether it's a go or a no-go. And in each of the ones we've done that process, and it was enthusiastically accepted by the employees. And I don't think, in one I think we did allow people to do 100%, but in the other ones I think that we limited it to maybe 50% of their 401k account. We didn't want to put all their eggs in one basket. So that's a technique that's doable.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question. We've talked a lot about the benefits of an ESOP, and David did a great job talking about, culture, morale, empowerment, all the upsides of an ESOP. What about the flip side of that? Is there any limitations that are placed on a company that is ESOP in terms of ownership and managerial decision making? Does it handcuff you at all?
Yeah, that's really a good question, and that's a question that comes in all the time. One of the first questions are asked, will my employees know what I make? And the answer to that is generally no. They don't have to know what you make. Is it going to change how you run the business? You being the owner, the management team. And as a general rule, it's not going to change how you run the business. There are a couple of changes that you will need to make. If you and I own a business and you and I are the directors and we set up an ESOP and now the ESOP owns 100% of the company, we no longer can be, and we just sold a control premium, ESOP has control. We no longer can be the controlling members of the board of directors, for example. Because the Department of Labor said, you just sold control, but you kept control. That's a no-no. So what we do is say you and I would still be on the board, but we're gonna pick 2 or 3 independent board members. Chuck Hoagie did that 8 years ago for me in a local company. And so we have a board that you and I would help identify good members, good business members in Fargo-Moorhead area. It would be approved by the trustee. And so they would have overall responsibility, that board, of how the company is managed. We want maybe an independent board member to be the chairman of the compensation committee. So you and I couldn't keep up taking $800,000 a year. Maybe that would be limited. So there are some changes structurally, but if you're running the business before the ESOP and you want to continue running it and the trustee says that's a good thing with you and your management team, that will really continue without change.
And wouldn't that be part of the reason to maybe do a partial ESOP rather than 100% also? Consider a 30%?
Yeah. Steve's point is if you do a 30% ESOP, then you haven't sold control. And therefore you wouldn't have to change the board structure. The downside that I see of that, in addition to the tax inefficiency, is when Joe values the company, that you're going to be selling 30% instead of 100%, he's going to take a minority discount and apply that to your stock. So your stock may be worth $100 a share, but when he applies his 20% minority discount, you're only going to get $80. And so that's, when we do that analysis, that may be just fine. You say, well, the next time I sell, I'll get control, that's fine. But from a governance standpoint, Steve, you're absolutely correct. You and I could still be the board members in that instance.
And that's how our company is structured. That's why I asked that question, is because we are a 30% ESOP, to answer your question. So we could keep our governance as we wanted.
Okay.
Rolling that out.
Yeah, good point. Are you an S Corp or a C Corp?
S Corp.
S Corp? Okay. So do you make large contributions?
We make large contributions to the federal and state governments. Yes.
Good question. If there's nothing else, we'll be sticking around afterwards if you'd like to ask additional questions, but maybe it's time to hear from Joe Skorcheski talking about the valuation process. Is it Joe now, or is it? Okay, thanks.
Very good. All right, thanks very much. Before I kind of get rolling, and not to, believe it or not, I was going to bring this up, not to defend Steve's ownership structure, but I'm actually one of the few folks, even at Chartwell, that tend to like partial ESOPs, S-Corp ESOPs. I think that they can work pretty well. There is some, leakage, and I'll give you kind of an example, right? If a company makes $10 million a year, let's say, we're going to have to make a $5 million distribution, S-Corp distribution, so that we can have our shareholders pay taxes. If the ESOP owns 25% of the stock, they get their share of that, but that is tax-free. And so those funds can be either used to pay off the purchase obligation, the question earlier, where's the money come from? Now, on the ESOP, I'm getting contributions from the company, and I'm getting these S-Corp distributions, so it makes the ongoing ESOP work a little bit better. Or if there is an eventual plan to get to 60% or 100%, you can essentially, squirrel away some funds in the ESOP over several years of distributions, and then go ahead and use that to make the big purchase to get to 100%. So it's not, it can be inefficient, but if you have either of those two purposes, it can work pretty well. So I was asked to kind of talk about 3 specific questions, I think. And I have way too many slides for the amount of time, so I'm happy to share these with the group afterwards. But what's all involved in valuation and how do we look at value? So a lot of this stuff actually has been talked about previously, but the ESOP per regulation can pay fair market value, it can pay a kind of a control value, or it could pay a minority value depending on how much stock the ESOP acquires. Those numbers can be different than what is known as strategic value. So the ESOP is known as a financial buyer, can only pay what the cash flows of the company are worth. And so this was the example that Bob had shared earlier. If you're out to get the absolute top dollar and get your cash immediately today, you're probably more likely and better off going and trying to find a competitor or a strategic buyer to buy your company. The ESOP cannot pay more than control. It can't pay this strategic premium, which can range from 20 to 50 to 80%. Most strategic premiums are in the 25% range. Okay, so fair market value. These are the guidelines. This is what's on the wall at Chartwell. Fair market value definition. What's the price that an asset or stock would exchange hands between a willing buyer and a willing seller in an arm's length transaction. It's not a distressed sale situation, and everybody has knowledge of the asset that is being sold. And so, very simply, our value and our valuation techniques come down to, what's the cash flow, what's the sustainable cash flow of the company, and then you apply a market multiple to that to get the enterprise value or the value of the business. So I'm a company, I make $1 million a year. I would apply a 5 multiple to that, so the value of my company is $5 million. And then when we go to value the stock, then we look, well, what's on the balance sheet? So maybe I've been around for 40, 50 years, I own a building, I've got a couple $1 million of cash. and I have no debt, so my equity is $8 million, or maybe I just bought out the business, or made some big investments. Maybe I have $3 million of debt on the books, and so the equity of your company is $2 million in that example. I'm going to skip through these next couple slides, talking about value. You know, it is infinitely more complicated, right, than what I just illustrated. But that's kind of the back of the napkin idea. You know, what's the sustainable cash flow of a company that can be really difficult? Are the cash flows all over the place? Are you in big growth mode? You know, how many adjustments are there to the cash flow? And then the multiples usually based on your size and the risk of the firm. So what process do we take when we're engaged by a trustee to go through and value the shares of an ESOP company? We'll ask for a bunch of due diligence information, so financial information, corporate documents, operational matters, strategic plans, you know, employee information, legal, regulatory documents. And we'll come in and take all of that data, 5 years of history, hopefully some sort of a forward-looking forecast. We will come out and do a management interview and company visit alongside the trustee to get to understand your business. You know, we're never going to know it as well as you do, but we are essentially, you know, you are selling your business in this process, and so the due diligence process takes, you know, some time to get to know the company. And this is where we want to hear the story behind the numbers. So explanations of why the company has been succeeding, or explanations that, gee, we thought we were going to make $2 million, we made $1.8 million. You know, explain the difference between the gap. And we'll come out, you know, what's your competitive landscape like, what's your sales team, what's the depth. We want to spend a lot of time understanding the organization chart, the structure, all of that to help us get comfortable with this cash flow stream and what the ESOP is buying. We take that, we go back to our office. We also do some industry and economic and market research. You know, company, you might have a really good company that's participating or selling into the ag business right now, right? That has an impact on your business. You could be the best company in the world at selling typewriters, but if nobody's buying typewriters anymore, that affects the value of your company, right? Then we'll go out and determine value since we've been talking about a transaction. You know, we would, on behalf of the trustees, sort of negotiate with the selling shareholders to arrive at a price in terms. So there are three valuation approaches that are commonly used, and I'll spend most of my time talking about the first one. Under the income approach, there's something known as the discounted cash flow analysis, where we take a look at the future 5-year, let's say, outlook for the company's revenue and profitability, and we apply a discount rate to those cash flows to get them back to present value. The advantage of this method is it's forward-looking, and that's really important in valuation because it's nice what the company has done in the past, but if I'm buying stock, if I'm buying preference today, I don't get the past, I get the future cash flows. And so that analysis is really important, and in that way we're sort of risk assessing the business. What's the likelihood that this company can achieve this forecast that was put forth? You know, the disadvantage, right, nobody's got a crystal ball, and we understand that markets change and businesses change, but this is probably the preferred and most utilized valuation methodology. It's how private equity firms, when they go in to buy businesses, that's the analysis that they do. And then depending on your industry, we might do some market approaches where we look at publicly traded companies. So we've got some logos at the end here of ESOP companies. So for example, Coburn's, we look at other publicly traded grocery stores, and we can see on a daily basis what they're trading at as a revenue multiple or an EBITDA multiple, and that gives us a sense for what the value of Coburn's could be. Obviously, that method is really positive in that case. We do the same method for David at Preference, comparing Preference to Manpower. A little bit of a disconnect in terms of business size and risk and opportunities. So the method works in certain cases and isn't the best in other cases. Similarly, there's a merger and acquisition method where if we can identify, this company in North Carolina sold for 6 times profit or 1 times revenue and is really like our company, that would be a good indication of value for our company that we're valuing. So another topic that we're asked to bring up is, what are your ownership transition options? And obviously ESOP is why we're here to speak today, but it really is quite simple, right? We either, if we own a business, we can either transition it externally by selling the company to a private equity firm or a competitor. Going public is something that is only reserved for the really large companies generally. We can merge and partner up with another company. Or we can transition the business internally. We can gift it to our family. We can sell it outright to management, the next group of leadership in an MBO or management buyout scenario. Or we can establish an ESOP and transition the business internally that way. The other option that's not up here is you can die and let your estate deal with the business as well. But not a lot of people choose that option. Why do businesses do? Bob did a great job of covering. Why do you choose an ESOP? The most common takeaways for us on this slide is it does provide a little bit more certainty in actually closing a transaction. Hired an investment banker. We have a group of individuals at our firm that do that as well, and they'll tell you, the likelihood of closing a transaction is significantly less than in an ESOP transaction. The governance, in certain cases, things have to adjust a little bit. Adding some independent board members is usually a good idea, but at the same time, we're not making wholesale changes. We don't have a new boss in India that we have to report to. And really, it's about perpetuating the business and leaving the legacy. How do we create a sustainable company that can continue to transition ownership and perpetuate itself out for the next 10, 20, 40 years? There's some cultural advantages that David spent a good amount of time talking about, and then there are tax benefits. It is the more efficient way to transition ownership because of the tax benefits. It allows for the debt to be paid down a little bit faster, and if you're a C corp, it has some. There's a specific transaction called a 1042 transaction where if you're a C corp and you sell 30% of your stock to an ESOP, you can actually defer the capital gains on that transaction into the future. And so there are advantages for the company, and there are some advantages for the seller as well. And then I believe that Bob did a great job talking about the process. The last one that's on there, which is the fun part too, is communicating your transaction to the public, to the employees. There's a lot of good press and publication that you can take advantage of. In case somebody asks some very specific questions, we've got some slides there. And then, the one statistic that I always like to bring up is that, the formation of the Fargo 100 is a good example. There's about the same number of public companies as there are ESOP companies, and you spend all the news and all the publicity is focused on the markets and all these public companies, and as well it should be. They're big companies, but I'm always astounded at how many folks have never heard of an ESOP before, and 12 years ago I was one of them. I didn't know anything about ESOPs. They don't teach it in school. It's just not something that's very common, but the more that you look around at your neighbors, and there's lots of great success stories, and all different kinds. 100% ESOPs, 20% ESOPs, companies that go 0 to 100, companies that sell 30% and then they do the remaining 70%. The ESOP is a shareholder, and so it can be the sole shareholder, or it can be a shareholder and sit at the table with the other shareholders. There's no, there's nothing wrong with being a small ESOP. There's some cost, right, associated with hiring advisors and whatnot, and so size generally does make a little bit of a difference in terms of it wouldn't make sense to have a 5% ESOP because of the cost of it. Unless you're Starkey and you're $1 billion company, then you can have a 5% ESOP, and 5% of $1 billion is still a lot of money. And then I just threw up some ESOPs that we know about here in North Dakota. So I think that brings me to the end of my slides. So be happy to do another round of questions or toss it over to Jess and talk a little bit more. Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the I noticed on one of your slides you had the idea of depth of team as well as strength of team as part of the valuation, and of course that's an area we work heavily in, is building those teams. But I have seen where ESOPs have come in and I really questioned if they had a team at all and why they were doing an ESOP. But what weight do you put towards that depth of leadership or capability of leadership? Because I know investors will always say, can this management team actually deliver if I invest?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's not, we wouldn't look at it all that different than a private equity firm. We want a strong, motivated team to perpetuate the business. So if you are 65 and you have all the relationships and there's not the next, group of leaders below, an ESOP might not be a viable option, right? So we're either going to discount the crap out of that future cash flow stream because we don't believe that the forecast is real. And so it might, what we would realistically do is say, right now might not be the right time. 2-3 years from now might be a better time. So it is amazing how long of a process it can be, and you have to get ready to sell your business, even if it's just to your employees. If your plan is to cash out and walk away, we have seen it happen a couple of times, but what if you don't transition your business well? If we take a seller note, let's say, so I do a transaction and it's $10 million and they're going to pay me off $1 million a year for the next 10 years. Well, and I leave and retire. If the business only makes $300,000 a year, it's going to take me a long time to get my money back on that seller note. So you're really, the funding of this, the company is the golden goose that funds and makes this all work. And so if the golden goose experiences some issue, that's when you see some problems. And in Bob's example that he gave, I mean, we would argue that that those businesses didn't fail because of the ESOP, right? Not every company lives for 100 years and then perpetuates in the future. So the short answer is very important to have a good group of leaders underneath and be able to have people step up and run the business going forward. Because the Jess isn't going to want to do that. The ESOP doesn't bring anything to the table from a operational or management perspective. If you got bought out by a private equity firm, they might come in and have a group or a team that helps run the company. And ESOP is not that buyer.
Are you typically hired by the owners looking to sell to the ESOP? And if you are, who shares the responsibility in covering the cost of your position? Because you really are, and the trustee probably has a seat at the table, do they not, in trying to
Yep.
come up with
So the fun part of the company always pays all the professional fees, right? We work on both sides. Similarly to Bob, there many times in substantial deals, there's a financial advisor that works on behalf of the company and the selling shareholders, and there's a structure fee arrangement for that. And then the trustee will have their financial advisor and their legal team, and the engagement agreements are all set up that the company is funding, is paying for all the advisor fees. We write in our agreements, and so would Bremer when we're working for the trust, is that our analysis is not contingent upon to remain independent. Our fee isn't contingent upon, well, we'll only pay you if you tell me it's worth $18 million. We remain an independent party, but at the end of the day, the costs of doing a transaction obviously are borne by the company, as well as the ongoing, we didn't really spend a whole lot of time talking about ongoing fees, but once an ESOP is in place, there's sporadic legal fees. Every once in a while, if you change anything on your plan document, there's an annual valuation that needs to be done, and you can choose to either keep your external trustee, or you can actually transition to an internal trustee and have some employees of the company actually be the trustees on an ongoing basis. Other fees am I forgetting on those are the main ones. Oh, and administration, right? Administration of the plan, just like if you have a 401k administrator.
Do you ever have a capital call from your ESOP? If, say the investor does not, or the seller does not want to wait for 15 years to get paid off, what do you do then? Does the ESOP have a capital call? Or?
So, obviously, there's really, there are a couple of notes for the financing of it. Again, let's say we have a $10 million company that does a 0 to 100% transaction. You might go out and get $4 million from a bank, and they'll loan you that money, and then the seller note would take would be $6 million, and depending on the initial transaction, you would set that up over, those terms need to be market terms. So that's part of the negotiating of the transaction. So it could be a 5-year note or a 7-year note or a 10-year note, and you now, instead of being a stockholder, are a debt holder in that company, and that plays out the same way based on how it's initially set up. There's another note between the ESOP and the company that is over a much longer period of time to release shares, usually 15, 20, 25, 30 years. We've seen those notes. And so those are two separate notes. And so I'm not sure if that helped answer the question, but as when you hold that seller note, you're usually subordinated to the bank. Is usually a requirement of that, and you have all the rights to that you would loaning money to this company, but I don't think that you can accelerate or say I'm not going to wait that 7 years. I want it all now. That's not your right, right? As only upon default, right?
What's the process for determining the length of the repurchase obligation?
So that internal loan, yep. So this is kind of a cool, unique part that's the ESOP community has gotten a lot smarter on over the last 5, 10, 15 years. We're really looking at what's the benefit level that would be delivered to our employee owners. So, and there's no right or wrong to that. Do you want to deliver a 5% benefit, or an 8% benefit, or an 18% benefit? There's no right or wrong necessarily to that, but you would do some analysis, figure out what that is. So generally speaking, the shorter the loan, the more shares get released every year. So 10-year loan, you release 1/10 of the shares every year, and that would provide probably a higher benefit than having a 30-year loan where you only release 1/30 of the shares every year. That might drive a 5% benefit. But every company is very different based on how much payroll it has and the value. It's very specific, but there's a value to payroll ratio that needs to be analyzed to figure that out. Because there's lots of companies that make a lot of money with very few people, and there's a distribution company that might only make 4 or 5% margins, has a lot different benefit level than somebody that's making 20% margins. So you do that analysis to figure out what the benefit level is. That's probably best practices today. Good. Well, I'll give Jess a few minutes here to talk, and yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Joe. Chartwell does a great job. They have a lot of clients in the Fargo-Moorhead community, much like Bob does. And so we always look forward to our conversation with Chartwell every year when they come up with a new stock price. And then about 1.5 years ago, Preference hired an external trustee. I was a trustee for ESOP until that point in time. And it's a pleasure to introduce to you Jess Helvig with Bremer Trust.
Did anyone recognize on Joe's list of clients, one of them was a brewery? Anyone recognize that? I wonder how that due diligence session goes. It's pretty in-depth, I'm sure. Sitting back, kind of sandwiched in between some great speakers. Mr. Shields coming up, so I'll keep it short. If I were to sit here and just kind of take a 5,000-foot overview and say what was the common theme of Bob, of Joe, of David, it's team. And whether you talk internally in your companies, having good team, having good support around you, externally from an ESOP perspective, team is really a key driver into the success of that ESOP. I don't know that I've ever met any business owner who is in a business to provide an employee benefits plan. That's just not why you go into business, right? Providing an employee benefits plan is usually a function of running a business. And so, whether you're trying to really focus on retention and attraction of new employees, whether you're looking for it to provide a ready market, as kind of Joe mentioned before, ESOPs can really have a nice benefit to that. And so Kurt was very diplomatic in saying I've got 2 minutes to talk, and so I'll keep it short. I think both Bob and Joe did a great job of approaching ESOPs from the transaction standpoint, the initial startup of it, which is key. A lot of you are maybe in the room today to hear about that. From our role as a trustee, and again, I work with Bremer Trust here in town, our role it remains similar, whether we're talking specific to the transaction initially or as an ongoing trustee. And that role really revolves around what's best for the employees. I think it was Bob that mentioned the fiduciary. I mean, we are the fiduciary for our plans, for our participants, and so that is the highest level of representation that's defined by the DOL. And so really, when we look at it at an ESOP, whether it's the transaction piece of it, whether it's the ongoing administration and running of the ESOP, our focus remains kind of that guiding light, that what's in the best interest of the employees. And in a lot of cases, the best interests of the company and the employees are merged. I mean, they're hand in hand. And so it sounds like a simple concept, and a lot of times it is. There are times where we have to step back and say, okay, this does make sense for the employees, or have we thought about this? And so a couple of quick slides that I'll skim through. I mentioned I work with Bremer Trust, the parent company, Bremer Financial. Kind of the two key things that we're proud of: roughly 2,000 employees across a 3-state footprint, about $11 billion in assets. That second to bottom bullet point, I think, provides us some nice inside information into this universe of ESOPs. Our ownership structure on the Bremer Financial Corp is about 90% owned by a nonprofit trust. The other 10% is owned by the employees. And so that ownership structure, specifically the ESOP, gives us some unique niche into this market. And you'll notice that the more you're around ESOP communities, it is a small community. And so I think that lends some credence there. Specific to Bremer Trust, as I mentioned, we are the fiduciary arm of Bremer. I think one nice takeaway on this slide is just the sense that of the $4.5 million in assets as of the end of the year, about half of it is in retirement plans, specific to qualified 401ks, 403bs, pensions, and ESOPs. So it is a big function of what we do. We obviously are very happy to be in the space. Bob and Joe both did a great job of really lining out ESOP advantages. I think, if I were to, I'm definitely a summary guy. If I were to really summarize this slide, I'd say there's 3 really big advantages. It provides a ready market for a seller. And in the case where perhaps the seller has the next generation waiting in line, but doesn't want to strap them down financially, or perhaps the opposite. They don't have that next generation that wants to be in the business, but they want to keep the benefit of the company in the community and not lose control, or perhaps stay in the saddle for an extra couple of years. All of those things from the ownership or the seller side are key attractive points, I think. The tax benefits, Joe mentioned those. I resisted the urge to, when David said I don't pay taxes, I wanted to yell out legally, you don't pay taxes. But there is some real tax benefits to ESOPs that have remained intact basically since they've been formed. And then from the employee side, again, attraction, retention is a key focus that employers are, especially in this area where the labor market is tight. What extra leg up can I get on my competition as far as to provide that extra benefit that really helps keep employees sticky? I mean, it really gets them involved and has them factoring that into the decision process if I'm getting offered another $1 or $2 an hour somewhere else. That ESOP sometimes can be that extra benefit that makes them see bigger picture. Again, kind of back to my initial comment, ESOP is all about team. You have a good team in front of you. An ESOP normally runs a lot more efficiently, effectively. Again, as a business owner, you're not in the business to run a retirement plan. So put people around you that can help you run it, so that allows you to focus on the day-to-day activities of your business. From a trustee's perspective, again, what's nice for us is whether we're talking initial transaction or whether we're talking ongoing administration, a lot of this stuff applies for both. You know, as serving as the trustee, again, our main role is helping you delegate, as an owner of a company, helping you delegate your fiduciary responsibilities so that you can focus on running your business. Obviously, the custody part just goes lockstep with being a fiduciary of the assets. Joe mentioned a little bit about the ESOP loan repayment and share release. Sometimes that's a tough concept as far as thinking about, if I have a loan externally, what happened was on the transaction, we had to borrow money somewhere, whether it was from the seller or from a bank to start this thing. But internally, kind of to that point, how are we going to structure the release of that share to structure that benefit? Because obviously, depending on what industry you fall under, different industries tend to have different benefit levels, and what you're trying to provide is really a key concept into looking at that study. From a participant standpoint, being we are the voice of the participant and in charge with that, I think a big function for ESOPs is they're not real common. It's not like a 401k that every company in the block has a 401k. Excuse me, ESOPs are pretty specific, and so a lot of times in our view, the more the employees understand about that benefit, the more they appreciate it. And the more they appreciate it, the more they tend to have some loyalty to the company. And so that's kind of a hand-in-hand, step-in-step process. And then again, like I mentioned, from the plan administration services side, that's there's more tests and more non-compliant or compliance tests to run than you want to talk about. Every number in the book is listed on the DOL website. So again, leave it to the professionals. How'd I do, Kurt? I keep us going? Okay. I'll open it up for questions now. I'm excited to hear Steve talk, so I want to sit back down. But any questions that I can answer from trustee or third-party administrator or administration standpoint? Everyone else is excited to hear Steve too. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
I'll just add, we didn't know at Preference until about 1.5 years ago that you can have one ESOP support partner that will serve all three of those functions: a trustee, participant administrator, and your plan administrator. It's a sweet deal. It runs really smooth. So thanks for all you do for us, Jess. President of my favorite toy store in the world. Please help me welcome Steve Shield.
Well, I'll keep it short because they talked about all the legal stuff, so I'll talk about all the fun stuff, right? Why do you want to do this? And that's why I'm here. You know, Shields, we've been in business now for 115 years. We started profit sharing in the early 70s. We went on to an ESOP in 1991. So we're 25 years into this plan. And so as an owner, as someone who has an invested interest in my employees, why do I want to have people on an ESOP? You know what? 401k is a lot easier to run. You call the bank up, you say, what's your fees? You negotiate between 3 banks, done, right? It's easy. An ESOP's going to require a lot more work on your part. It's also, I don't remember who mentioned earlier, but she said you must have motivated owners. If you turn this into an ESOP, you're taking money out of your pocket. As an owner, you are probably never going to make as much turn this into an ESOP as you would selling it on the open market, okay? And in our example, that was taken to the extreme. We had 2 of our partners, my grandfather and his brother, who said, we'd like to donate 1/3 of this company to the ESOP. And they went through all the steps to do that, but they basically gave the shares to start the ESOP and got their employee program set up through that personal motivation to keep the company in the hands of their employees. And why is it so important? Well, there's no other retirement plan that you as a leader are going to have for your people where they control what happens on a daily basis. Yeah, I can go into my 401k and I can switch around my allocations, but if the stock market goes south, what happens to your stock? We all know, right? We've lived through the last 6 years. It doesn't matter how good an investor you are, it's going to go down sometimes. But your company, if it continues to perform well year after year after year, will continue to perform well in your ESOP. Our company's ESOP stock has never gone down. In 2001, when the stock market crashed after 9/11, our ESOP only went up $1. And we got hugs from all of our people because it went up $1. It's never gone down. As our company performs well, it does well. And there are the outside factors that were mentioned earlier that sometimes can hold it back or sometimes can push it up, but it is judged on your performance. And every associate in our store, in our company, every day has an opportunity to affect the outcome of their stock, of their retirement plan. It's a huge tool. As David mentioned, you can get buy-in from the employees. You know, especially at our company when they've been there 10 years, 15 years, and that number starts to be pretty darn big every year, and the growth is fantastic, and they come in and they go, well, I could retire, or I could go somewhere else, but boy, that was a nice number. And they just buy in. And if you go into our store in Fargo, you might meet Leon up in Guns. Leon's been with us for over 20 years. You might meet Dwayne or Steve down in Shoes, been with us more than 20 years. You might meet some of our full-time cashiers who've been with us 2.5 decades. And in retail, that is unheard of. But they've bought in. And part of the reason they bought in is they like the culture, but part of it is they like that ESOP statement, let's be honest. And it's going to help them when they go to retire. And the best way to illustrate that, and the way I'll just wrap this up because we're short on time, is a story. So for years, I came into our corporate office 11 years ago. Before that, I ran the Fargo store, the Rapid City store, the Moorhead store, the Iowa City store, and the Eau Claire store. The Fargo store, I had the opportunity to work with a lady who'd been with our company for 37 years. She was 77 years old the day she decided to retire. She worked part-time for most of those 37 years, but she'd worked enough to qualify for the ESOP. And so when she was done and we sent her that final ESOP statement, we said, here's what you're gonna get. She came into my office the next day, excuse me, I'm probably gonna tear up a little bit. And she said, I never thought I'd get to do what I'm gonna get to do. I have over 20 years of income sitting here that I can do whatever I wanna do till I'm 97, and that doesn't count anything else that I've done on my own. She gave me a big hug, I hugged her back, and boy, I'll tell you what, as an owner, what a cool feeling. They aren't gonna get that retirement plan most other places, but if your ESOP in your company performs, what a great ability to give that associate, that part-time cashier who's given 37 years of her life to you and your company. There's no better return than that.